Asteria, I'm so bad at the intro for this particular show. I don't know why. I'm just like, what do I say? All right. Hi, and welcome back to Duality Bites. Duality Bites. I'm Carmela, your hag about town, and I am back today with one of my favorite people in the entire world, and I'm not just saying that because he's sitting in front of me. David. Hi, David.
Hi.
Hi. It's so lovely to see you again.
Yes, very
to
much
continue
so.
to see you. You know, the magic of producing. We never actually left each other's presence. But I wanted to talk to you today.
Do we ever really? Aren't we always just like, a little box on the screen away?
Yeah, always a little box on the screen. I'm like, hey, we could be friends. Like, you can talk to me whenever you want. No, we all actually have become friends over the last, oh my gosh, it's been over a year since we all met.
Yeah.
Which is a whole episode in and of itself of, four strangers enter a Discord call and then fall in love with each other. So I wanted to talk to you today. Asteria had made a mention to me of kind of the kind of made up spectrum of players that we have, of gaming experience all the way through acting experience. And you and I are kind of on the opposite ends of that spectrum. Our other three castmates are somewhere in the middle. They have acting experience and lots of gaming experience. You and I are on the opposite ends. You are.
I love the idea that there's a world that is divided on a spectrum purely of gaming to acting, and everybody must fall somewhere.
Everyone
on that
falls
spectrum,
in there somewhere,
whether they've ever done either of them before.
You're either natural on this side or this side, but I think of everything is a soup. Everything's a spectrum. You fall somewhere in there, and it changes. You slide and move around. Because I've definitely started to slide more towards the middle, and you've also started to slide towards the middle of that made-up spectrum. But when we started this, I had never done any theater, not in the capacity that everyone else on the show has, and you have done a lot of theater, a lot of acting. It's been basically your whole life, but not really much gaming. And I've done gaming my whole life. So we thought it might be interesting to see how those two experiences interact. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about it. So when Asteria approached you and said, hey, do you want to come do this show? I imagine you've gotten that kind of request before for just productions. But when you found out there was a game aspect to it, how did that feel?
Oh, I mean, it was an instant yes. It was actually, in a way, and it was an answer to a secret wish. You say the offers for, well, first of all, I wish I lived in a world where I was getting offers for work, on every corner, but
hire
no,
David Skeist, please. He's amazing.
but yes, no, I for sure, of course, as an actor, yeah, in my work, there's offers come and offers go. But what it's more, there's a separate trajectory, which is that it's not the first time I've ended up in a conversation through the theater space with people in the gaming space, who have told me that they have their own games, and I have on several occasions said, "Oh, please ask me, like, pick me." I would love to play. I've always had a curiosity about gaming. I played like one session as like an 8-year-old once, and a D&D game. And I was completely seduced. Well, or I was partially seduced, not seduced enough to ever do it again, because I may have been seduced by gaming, but I was kidnapped by theater. And so,
and what a Stockholm syndrome
kid,
relationship you have.
Yeah, for real. But it was always, gaming was always a little bit the one that got away. So I had wanted to experience gaming just as a hobby and had never been given an opportunity to. So when Asteria proposed this, it was, I was excited about it as an actor, but I was very excited about it to experience gaming, but no, also the combination of the two. I mean, that it was going to be about storytelling, and Asteria and I also, we share some kind of deep, I think, personal philosophical interests in terms of like the lens through which we see the world. And I think that comes from, or that contributed to us being theater kids together. We were theater kids together. And so the lens through which she looked at, well, what would it mean to produce a game, and what would it mean to produce a game on a podcast, and what would it mean to tell a story in this way, and what would I want to tell a story in this way about? You know, the sort of the thematic connections were already there, and I was so drawn to that as a storyteller, and as an artist, and as an actor, and as somebody who wanted to play a game to begin with, and as someone who's curious about finding different forms of expression. It just, all of it felt absolutely right and absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
Terrifying. But of course I had to say yes. There was never any question about that.
You know, it's really funny that you said that gaming was like the thing that got away from you. I had the inverse problem. You know, I'd played games my whole life. I think the first time I ever saw a D&D book, I was sitting at my stepmother's house, and my stepbrother and his friends were all playing. And this is like advanced D&D. So this is like 4 or 5 editions ago for D&D. And I'm maybe 6 or 7 years old, and I wanted to be included. So they helped me like make a character. And like, that was my first introduction. I got a lot of my nerd credit, quote unquote, from this stepbrother. That's how I learned how to play Magic the Gathering, like a lot of different like old Nintendo games. And it kind of made me a lifelong gamer. So I've been playing games my whole life. I'd always had an interest in acting and theater. I loved theater growing up. Some decisions over the course of my life caused me to let a lot of that go. But I was also like a painfully shy like child. And I ended up playing sports instead, because I'm like, I knew I was good at sports, but I didn't think I was good enough to act. And so I kind of just I let it go. I let it get away from me, which was a kind of a regret for the rest of my life. So when I started to get into the podcast space, I'm a trivia podcaster. That was my point of entry. But I also fell in love with audio fiction, people who were doing audio dramas through podcasting. And I got to know a lot of those people. We would meet at different podcast conferences, and I would just absorb all of the stories. My very first podcast I ever listened to was, in fact, an audio fiction called Welcome to Night Vale, which actually has a little bit of influence on how I did the production of this show. You had actually asked me once how I came up with the idea for the very end of the end card, where I put the quote at the end.
Yeah,
there was something that Night Vale used to do at the very end of their show when they're doing their outro, is they would kind of just have this made up quote at the end. So I kind of took inspiration from that, which is the very first podcast I ever listened to. And then instead just like grab like either a line from the show that the delivery was just so good, like Jay Ben's "You Can Find a Skeleton Anywhere," or just something that's just so funny that I have to listen to it again. But that's where that came from. So it's just all the little things that you borrow, all the art that you absorb, you just kind of borrow it and remix it and put it back out there. But yeah, it's just kind of funny that you're like, no, gaming got away from me. And I'm like, no, acting got away from me. And now we're both here and getting to do it together.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's extraordinary.
It is. And I was also terrified when I like heard about all the other experience that everyone else had. Because I was like, it pulled at that old fear of mine of why I had originally let acting go, because I didn't think I was good enough. And I was like, oh, well, I'm going to be sitting with 4 people who believed that they were good enough and did it. And so now I have to kind of pull myself, through that fear, hope and fear, everyone. And
let me just disavow you of one thing really quickly. Those who do it and those who, what did you say? They thought they could do it because they did it or something like that.
Oh,
Those who do
they
it,
have done it.
those who do it and those who believe they can do it are not an equal set.
And that's fair. And I know people who, I mean, I think, I mean, Liza Minnelli got intense stage fright her entire career, and she's, you know, one of the most famous theater actresses in history. So I know that it's not always, I mean, you probably have imposter syndrome. Everyone that we've ever worked with probably has imposter syndrome in a lot of ways. Getting into the psychology of the show, because that also comes across in our characters too. But but it was something I'd always wanted to do, and to be able to approach it from a gaming perspective, which is a space I do feel really comfortable in. That I was like, okay, so if I'm going to do it, then I can do it this way. And, you know, it honestly has opened up a lot of, it is let me rediscover some old loves of mine, which is really nice. In getting to work with you because you would start to have these conversations of like different plays and stuff. And I knew all these things at one point in my life. I just didn't know them anymore. And so I'm like, okay, well, I got to go know all these things so I can understand what the hell they're talking about.
Right.
Maybe not contribute to the conversation, but I'm like, no, I used to love these things. Like, why am I not embracing the things that I used to love? From some stupid decision I made 15 years ago. Like, I can have these back. So actually, thank you, and thank you to the other three, for helping me do that, even though you didn't realize that that's what you were doing.
Well, it's in a way the same thing has been happening. The same, or a reflection of that has been happening with me, in the sense that, you know, there are so many shared. You all, because you're in the gaming culture, there are so many shared cultural references.
Yeah.
To the big people who play games and the big people in the gaming world who I still don't know. I haven't had sort of the bandwidth to dive into this world, because it's time-based work, and it takes hours and hours to listen to something, and you don't just want to listen to something, to one episode of it. Right. But still, I'm listening to things differently because of the way you all talk, and the experience of gaming for sure is shifting it's very present in my mind all the time now. There is an alternate universe that is always just here right next to my own, where I'm a different person and I'm facing a different set of realities, and like, we're both kind of working our shit out, you know? But, and like, that's incredible. But also the references you all, like, I started reading sci-fi again. Like, I feel like the sort of the like re-entry into certain corners of the nerdosphere are really a joy for me, because I love it. I love that, and I love the fantasy aspect of it, and like, we're also 5 people who have like very different tastes. So it's also just like the music people randomly bring up, or the movies. One of my favorite things that we were doing early on when we were recording, I should try to bring it back. But I remember every once in a while it would come to me that it was like, oh, here's a potential cultural divide where I want to find out whether theater kids and gaming kids land on the same side of it. Like, I thought it was amazing that like people could come to tarot from both the theater world and the gaming world, but that astrology, not quite the same.
Right.
Things like that. So, and that's also been really interesting to find the points of cultural overlap and divergence in the theater world and the game.
Yeah. I mean, we've recorded a lot of these, we would set up these sessions like, we're gonna get it done in this amount of time, and then of course we'd go over, because we all would just end up in these conversations that were so interesting. And I remember probably one of the most memorable ones for me is, I forget who brought it up, it was probably you, like, what's a movie that you can only watch once?
Yes. Yeah.
And so then you sit there and you think about like, oh, I can only watch this once, and this is why. And then, but we all had different ones. Like, I could only watch this once. Or when somebody mentioned it, they're like, yeah, absolutely, I could only watch this once because X, Y, and Z. And it was an interesting icebreaker, I guess I could say, because for the most part, we were all strangers. But it was really interesting to see those touch points that we had, because we're 4 people from 4 different areas of the country that have 4 different life experiences. So, so
yeah. And it's a bit, as we were sort of like chit-chatting just before you started recording, I found myself really thinking about, and we were sort of talking about the kind of like the points at which we have these sort of deep intimacies and the points at which we have these huge gaps in our knowledge of each other. And what you're just saying now is making me think, obviously, yes, we're 5 people with very different life experiences. We're different ages. We're in different parts of the country where we come to this through different, for different reasons and in different ways. But in Lacuna, we are the 4 closest people to each other in their world. And we are making decisions together. And we like Orlean, which is to say David, knows as much about Ginny as anybody else in the real world or in the world of Lacuna, right? Because these characters are being built in relation to each other. And so that's, I don't know, that's really beautiful. And it's something that I understood. It's something that I think is very true of theater. In its own way, right? Like one of the things about theater is the intimacy that develops, right? It gets very tribal. It's every cast you're in is like going to be your best friends for life, and then they're not, and then their next cast is their best friends for life, but there are these deep, even if they are temporally bounded intimacies that occur because they're storytelling together. And and I would imagine that in the gaming world that exists too, that there is an intimacy inside of a game, or at least for sure that's what I've been experiencing in ours. There's an intimacy inside of a game that I think is very similar, in some ways.
I would say in some ways, yeah. The last kind of group I was in that I was in before the pandemic. I was in a group during the pandemic. Before the pandemic we just kind of met at a local game store. And so it was my partner and I, and then a few strangers. So we didn't know each other, but we knew each other in kind of the same like weird ways that we've come to learn to know each other. So it's kind of that weird, like, oh, I know that you get like this whenever you roll a specific number or when something specific happens. I know what to expect from you, but like, I don't know if you have a dog, it's just like, it's kind of a weird space. Probably not as intense as cast because, you're rehearsing together, you're doing 8 shows a week or whatever your time frame is. But you can get similar intimacies that you would get with a cast. And I know the 5 of us definitely have those kind of tribal intimacies in some ways, for sure. But I wanted to ask you, since you didn't have a ton of gaming experience, but you do have a lot of experience kind of approaching a character. What did you there's the mechanics of building a character. So there's your character sheet, but you came to this with a particular vision for Orlean. Is it, I know a lot of it was based in psychology, which I know you have another interest in because you're your own kind of Renaissance man. But
I'm the child of shrinks.
There's also that. Hey, I love
an
shrinks.
inescapable truth of my life.
Some people go to mass on Sundays. I go to therapy.
Bless the mental health professionals. Bless the mental health profession.
What was your kind of approach to coming to Orlean? Not necessarily, and then trying to build the mechanics around it.
Yeah, it's a great question. I really have to I don't have a stock answer to it. I know I talked in another Duality Bites about like the particular. I built his relationship with Cosmene on this one kind of element of Lacanian psychoanalysis, the psychoanalytic theory of this one particular thinker who believes that a child's sort of self, or a human self, fractures the first time the child recognizes themselves in the mirror. That there's a sort of rupture of like, I'm here but I'm there, and that the rest of our lives is in some way negotiating the space in between. So I knew I was interested in that. I knew that the conversation had already started with Asteria. I knew we were talking about the subconscious, and that this was also so I was already in that headspace. But so I started with that. I started with that question of like, what would happen if the mirror stage rupture was literal,
right?
So that was kind of content-wise. That was the germ. But I think even before that, I have to say, I was really building a character. It's a thing that as an actor, your character, you are building a character, but you're building a character from words on a page. You like, there is a set of things that are predetermined, generally speaking. You know what your character does over a certain period of time. You know what choices your character makes in certain key ways over a period of time. And so you're building your character, your characterization, right? Which in acting, we would talk, for sure, Stanislavski writes building a character, although he wrote it in Russian. But we also will often talk about building a characterization, which is already one interpretive level removed from creating a character from scratch. It sometimes happens in theater, in what's called devised theater or things like that. But usually you're building it around something. And so I found the task of building a character from scratch extremely intimidating. And so I knew it had to be centered on a few key questions that were interesting to me. Like I had that, but also we knew they were teenagers. We knew this was going to be sort of coming of age. And we knew these were going to be characters in a world that was struggling to grapple with its own unconscious fears. And I am a person who I'm a person who does that. I mean, as an actor, as a theater maker, as a composer, as an artist, like my sort of work, like the choices I've made in my life, what I brought myself to, the sort of work I've done is in that space, is in the space between what we think about, what we put our attention to. I'm asking for people's attention as an artist so that I can shift it to say, hey, think about this, right? Or what if you asked yourself this question? And to imagine what to do with that, right? So the way I dealt with how intimidating the task of creating a character was I kind of was like, okay, well, I'm going to filter myself through this character, like, or Leon's questions are going to be my questions to some degree, So what is a life story I can build using both elements of my own life story and elements of life stories that I've heard and people I know and things I've imagined, and like what are a set of circumstances through which I can frame this character that will allow him to essentially like allow me to ask the questions I'm asking through him. Because as an actor, I know that if I'm so scared, I'm so scared of improvisation. It's not my strong point, or isn't my strong point. It's certainly not what makes me feel like I'm standing on even ground, which is what makes improvisation so riveting to watch when it is, right? It's because it's dangerous. It's super vulnerable, right? And I was so scared of the vulnerability of the improvisation of the show. And I've had my crisis moments inside of it, but that I thought I wanted to create a character that would allow me to kind of have to do as little character work in the moment as possible, so that I could really just focus on the world building and on my relationship to it and on the questions the character was asking, on the journey he was going through. So that's kind of how I approached it. So then I built his questions, his duality, his, him being a druid connected him to nature. Those are, I'm very invested in questions of nature, but he's a city guy. I'm a city guy, so like, what is it to be a city person and who is trying to understand the lessons of nature? So I don't know. That's one example of a way in which I was like, well, how do I use the mechanics? Well, a druid, I knew initially, and I thought maybe he should be a healer, because that's also something I think about in my life. And then Asteria suggested the druid to me, and that also the connection to nature. A lot of the work I do as an artist is about nature. So then it was a question of using the mechanics of being a druid, right? To build the character around that. So what would it mean for a city dweller to have this kind of relationship with nature without creating a backstory that I can't talk about, because I don't know what it's like to grow up in a small town or in the woods.
Actually, I think that's very fascinating, because I wonder what actually did kind of lead you to the druid, given that Orleans is from essentially the equivalent to New York City in this world, which you grew up in New York, so you have, not a whole lot of it's mostly concrete and steel, but there is some, plants. I assume. I've never actually been to New York City. My grandfather is from the Bronx, but I've never been there. So if that connection,
I was just in the Bronx yesterday.
Oh, were you? I can talk about him later. But anyway. Oh,
no. You've had a connection. What is it?
It's funny you just said no. It's my no. It's my grandfather. He grew up in the Bronx. He grew up in Fordham, close to where it meets Belmont. So he hung out in Belmont a lot. He didn't leave New York City until he joined the Navy. That was the first time he stepped outside the city. He had never left until he was 18. So all of my family has been to New York City, but I've never gone. I've been upstate. I've been to Syracuse and Walton and all that stuff, but I've never been to the actual city itself.
Cool.
Which I don't know how that happened. So my sister's gone a lot.
The cool thing is you still get to experience it for the first time.
I do. And I know your address. I might just randomly show up at your doorstep like, hey.
Exactly.
I wouldn't use it for evil, I promise.
I know that about you.
No, but I kind of love that you approached it that way. I usually start mechanics up. I'm like, what's an interesting class that I want to play? Like, what would be interesting for me to play? So when we were doing our session zeros and kind of figuring out what kind of characters we wanted to play, I had stepped back and we were on a break or whatever. And I was talking to my partner and he made the joke of, what kind of cleric are you going to play? Because I play clerics a lot. And I was like, well, they don't have clerics in Daggerheart, so meh. So I played the closest thing to a cleric, which is a seraph. And part of that is processing. So I had typically avoided religion and religious characters for probably 20 years. But over the last few years, I've kind of re-embraced at least processing that information. And so I tend now to only play religious characters. Even though religion is not really something that happens inside of Lacuna, Ginny in particular feels like, because of the way she grew up, that Harrows is supposed to know everything. And it turns out Harrows doesn't know a goddamn thing. And it's just like, now I have
Harrows knows more. I think Harrows knows more than we gave her credit for, though. No, having just listened to episode 11, although I haven't listened to 12 yet, when it gets even dicier. But
yeah,
she definitely knows more than we give her credit for.
She knows a lot. It's I think I've said this to one of the group of us. She loves me, but not in the way that I needed it at the time. And so And of course, when you're 18, like you expect a certain thing, and when you don't get that, means everything has failed you. Like you deal in those absolutes when your frontal cortex is not fully developed.
Yeah.
So I always approach it from a gaming standpoint of mechanics first, and then build the character around that. Like, okay, I know I want to play this kind of class. What kind of character fits into this kind of class? And then build the story from that. And then, okay, this is who I'm going to be. And then when the game starts, things shift because you respond to what's happening. Like my initial characterization for Ginny was she was a much, much happier and more peppy kind of person than she ends up being. She ends up being a lot more serious and unintentionally funny, but that's just because I sometimes say things that are unintentionally funny.
And sometimes you say things that are intentionally funny.
Intentionally funny and in unfunny ways.
I would go so far as to say that your one skill is saying things that are funny.
I have to make jokes or I'll die. It's just a thing.
Heard that one.
Yeah. And then I found out that J-Ben is also that way, even though he is much more of a deadpan snarker than I am. So it's sometimes you miss it and you're like, what did you just say? Mm-hmm. And one of the things, and I kind of got into my head about it initially, but then I'm just like, no, this just is the way it is. When I play, and this is kind of the way I've always played, I don't change points of view. So like if I'm talking to you as Carmela, but then I'm talking to you as Ginny, I always say I don't say Ginny, or Ginny does, or Ginny says. I always go, right, then I'm going to do this. And I'm the only person that does that on the show. So part of me is like, I'm like, am I wrong? This is kind of the way I've always played. But I also approach them like, no, I'm Ginny. I'm Ginny. So I'm going to talk about me as if I'm Ginny. And so I don't know if you had to create, like, for you, did you have to create a division like this is David, this is Orlean? Or I'm just, I think it's interesting because then I'm like, I'm literally the only one that does it. So I don't know if it's because you have a tendency to want to create that divide.
What an awesome question, or provocation. Okay, can I ask a follow-up? And
Absolutely.
then I want to answer for sure. But I have a follow-up question to your question, which is, you may always use the first person pronoun, whether you're talking I as Carmela or I as Ginny, but I feel like there is I, David, feel like there is a difference between when you are speaking I as Carmela and I as Ginny. Like, I think there's still there's like, oh, I'm going to use my prayer dice. You're a different I than asking Harrow's, why me? Yeah. Right? Like, you're speaking of a different me. And so I think you're not changing the pronoun you're using, but I still think there's a clear divide between your player self and your character self. I just think you use I for both of you. They both use the pronoun I. I don't know. Does that feel right?
No, I see what you mean. And I do change the cadence. I talk very fast. For someone who grew up in the South, I talk extremely fast. But I do try to slow my cadence down when I'm Ginny. I also try and talk more through my nose to sound younger, because Ginny's 18, I am not.
Right.
So I do change a little bit, but I was like, I wonder, because sometimes, and this is the part where I'm like, am I doing this wrong? Spoiler alert, listeners, I think I do a lot of things wrong, and that's just because I have a syndrome, and I know a lot of you can relate to that. But anyway, I would say something, and Asteria would think I was Ginny saying it, and so then she would respond, and I was like, well, shit, now I gotta go with it.
Asteria here, butting in from the future where I'm recovering from a laryngitis hex. All I will say on this is that sometimes everyone is talking at once or in very rapid succession. When we are mid-scene, words come out of a player's mouth at that player's own risk. Carmela is doing just fine, but as the sayings go, a Shadowjack regrets nothing she freely chose, and a hag turns all to her own advantage. As you were.
And so sometimes
right.
And I think that's probably why J-Ben and Katie do it, because they want to have that delineation. I just don't know why you do it, because again, you don't have that same experience that they do.
Okay. So I don't know quite how nerdy to get about acting
please get,
in a way.
Please get so nerdy. I want to know so bad.
I might get a little nerdy.
Okay.
Okay. So one more question.
Okay.
For you.
Yeah.
Which is, I understand the vocal transformation you're doing. I think there's a vocal transformation between, but when you are talking to the Queen of Harrows, mm-hmm. and you say, "Why me?" Right? Mm-hmm. You're like, "I just have one question for you." Mm-hmm. Right? You won't leave the room. You're like, you have a burning question.
Yeah.
For her, right? Mm-hmm. Because Ginny is wondering this. Mm-hmm. And Ginny is wondering this. And you've been holding on to that question the entire time, like probably since we arrived in Berets, right? Or at least probably Ginny has, right? Have you, Carmela, been holding on to that question the entire time? And like, what is from whence comes your knowledge that Ginny needs to add that? Like when you finally get her alone and you say, "Why me?" Like, who's asking that?
Oh, that's interesting. Ginny is asking that. And maybe this is because I've done a lot of writing in the past, and like, oh, you have this character that lives in your head and they talk to you or whatever. That was definitely, it came from Ginny. Now Carmela is curious and wants to know all of the things, and Asteria will only tell them so much. But that question I think would have come directly out of Ginny. So, and I don't even know when that decision happened in my brain of ask Harrows this. And I think it might be partially because when we walked into that room, I was like, oh, well, this is my queen. Then, I should talk to her, or Ginny should talk to her. But then they weren't talking. And so I'm just like, well, now Ginny's like, did you pick me? Like, because now I feel like I'm not supposed to be here. So why me?
Right. Ginny was like, totally, what the fuck?
like, can you explain this to me? Because I don't understand. Yeah. And it comes off of, I still can't believe the entire first season really only takes place over the course of maybe 5 or 6 days. Right. Insane. Because like there's a whole lifetime between the first episode and the last episode. And then just like thing after thing after thing. And then all of that starts to build. And then you get to a point where you're like, maybe I can finally get an answer. And then when you realize you're not going to get it. Which, what a metaphor for life. but yeah, I think that's it. That question definitely came from Ginny. And sometimes I think I sit too far into my character, to where what I think that they would be feeling in that moment affects me a little too much. And so I have to like come out of it. And so that I'm wondering, like, is having that separation. So again, putting it back to my original question, is having that separation, does it keep you from sitting too far into a character? Right. And having that, because again, I don't have those pre-built walls because I've never done anything like this.
Oh, it's now I know more also about where that question is coming from. It's such a good question. FYI, I also teach fundamentals of acting to students up at Barnard and Columbia. So, I love, and I get this question from my students.
Okay.
One of the first things I ask them, is to write a journal about why act, and then also 5 questions that they don't know the answers to about it. And one of the questions that frequently comes up in those 5 questions is like, how does an actor separate themselves from a role? Is it dangerous to get too close to a role? All these are the questions about boundary between the self and the role. Okay. So first of all, I just want to say like there's a lot of language about what acting is and how somebody does it. There's so much technical language. There's so much technique, and everybody will argue about whether it's an intention or an objective or an action, or whether what the word event means. Is an event something that happens multiple times in a scene? Is an event something that happens one time in a play? Like things like that. What we get very, but the fact that when you say, I'm going to use my prayer dice, right? And when I asked you who was talking, when you said, why me? And those are different people, right? That's acting. That is fundamental. That is it. That's the whole thing, right? It's like you using your mind and body and voice to express, to express someone else or some other entity, or to achieve a goal even, right? It's like you play a role, even if that role is a role of yourself as this, and so like, that's the thing, that's acting. And so like gaming is completely acting. It's just acting for a very small audience who are also acting with you, right? That question of, so now in like contemporary acting practice, there's a lot of like newish sort of practices that have come in to sort of help with mental health and help with like behavior and all of that. And so this is intimacy coaching and intimacy direction, or intimacy direction or intimacy choreography, depends on whether it's film or theater. And that those are of course they are what they sound like. They're ways to protect actors in doing that kind of work, or work you would describe as intimate, but they're thinking more broadly about what does it mean to be healthy inside of the work of an actor. And one of the concepts that's come out of that work is called de-rolling, which is like actually creating a practical separation. Like when you are done with rehearsal, having some kind of a practice to mark that you are taking off the character. And there's, the history of theater is also like, there's a history of mask, whether it's commedia dell'arte or no theater or kabuki theater. It's always a kind of semi-spiritual practice, the putting on and the taking off of the mask, because masks are understood to be powerful. They come from somewhere else. They're connected to the other dimension. They're connected to the other side in some way. And so when you're wearing the mask, you are taking on something that you don't understand, that you never quite understand. And taking on a character is taking on something that you don't quite understand. Ginny says things you wouldn't say, or Leon says things and does things I wouldn't say or do. And those things get put out into the world. Right. And so there's something, so it's such a like rich question that you're asking, right? I know I definitely thought early on about the pronouns. I think we even had a conversation at some point early on about the pronouns, and I asked whether we were going to try to be consistent with pronouns or not. And I think what became clear to me pretty quickly was that everybody was kind of settling into their own mode of characterization. So like, okay, so I'm going to nerd out super quickly for another minute, which is like notions of character. There's like, we talked a little bit about this with Asteria, but like there's sort of Stanislavski acting, method acting, which is about really in some ways getting at inner truth, usually through action, intention, what do you want, and physical action, what are you doing, right? And in a way it tries to, that approach to acting is like, how much can I inhabit the character? How much can I disappear inside of the character, right? This is the kind of acting that is often used when you have a fourth wall. So your audience is looking at the stage, but there's no acknowledgement of the audience. It's like you want to be as private as you can. You're looking at private people doing private things. And so it's like you transform as much as you can. And then there's Brechtian acting. Brecht was writing in Germany up until the Third Reich, and then in exile after that. And his idea was that you don't want your audience to get lost in your performances. You want your audience to be seeing what they're seeing on stage and then reflecting back on their own world. So you don't actually, you want to transform exactly as much as you need to in order to tell the story and no more. Right. So it's never about the virtuosity of your acting. It can be. I mean, you can have moments about that, but really it's like, I'm telling the story, and in this story, this character needs to talk like this. So I'm talking like this to tell the story. Right. And as we know, I need to talk like this to tell the story. I'm talking like this. Right. So that it's all about the storytelling. And each of us has our own kind. Like, I think all actors are somewhere in between that in some way, or most, at least U.S. American actors, are working somewhere in between that, and we work differently depending on the demands of the material we're working on.
Right.
And so it's interesting to see the way the five of us all, like, when it's left open, we all are writing those boundaries between actor and character for ourselves in a way that I think allows us to do it without thinking about it too much. So, like, for me, it feels like way too much pressure to always be speaking from the point of view of Orlean. It's like I feel like I'm composing language. It's very mentally taxing for me to speak first person as Orlean, and I do it in some very kind of deep scenes. But I try to, in a way, I'm resistant to doing it because it requires a lot, and it's intimidating, and so when I can describe third person, Orlean feels like this,
right.
Orlean thinks this, this occurs to Orlean has been through this. And so I'm sort of, it's a little audiobook. That's kind of how you do it, what I was taught to do with audiobooks, where you're reading in the third person, but you're still taking on the emotional quality of the character. I feel like I'm sitting there talking about what Orlean is doing, and I'm navigating my own way into his emotional state, so that should it come up that I need to speak as him, I've sort of talked my way into it and know what, and can take that on. But it's important to me to be able to not always be accountable to what he says and be able to sort of describe him. And then I'm sort of both storyteller and character at the same time in that. And so I think talking about him in the third person allows me enough distance that I can work to get in there.
Right.
While also being able to, like, be transparent about the fact that, like, I'm David, the player, like, talking about, like, trying to understand, well, Orlean's been through this, so this is probably what he's going through, and this is,
right.
This is what he thinks. But in contrast, like, I don't think Orlean's voice sounds very different from David's voice. I think his, like, his frame of mind, his circumstances are different.
Right.
And so I think there's a difference, when Orlean's talking versus when David's talking, but it's an internal shift. It's not, I don't have a different voice for him particularly. And I think we all have a different spectrum on that. Like, J-Ben has a very different quality of voice. Like, he doesn't transform his voice, but he's got such a different quality. Like, Lemma speaks with a measured approach to language that just completely changes his rhythm and his intent. Lemma uses words in a way that J-Ben does not use words. Except when they do. When Lemma makes a joke, it's the best. Because then it's like both of them are there,
Right.
And, like, I feel like with you, I mean, you've described so well what your experience is. And it makes sense. Like, with you, Ginny is just, she has a certain pure intentionality. Like, Ginny's interiority is based on this crisis that her world is going through. And you come from that. When you are talking as her, she's coming from that place. And that's there's an inhabiting of that. And so there's a somewhat of a vocal transformation. You have a Ginny has a voice for sure. But I feel like her circumstances are just so present when you're talking as her. And then Katie has an accent and a complete characterization.
Right.
And it's like in, out. And then there are these places where she's in between, which are super interesting, incredibly interesting.
That she can flip that accent on and off. Amazing.
It's astonishing. It's astonishing. It is astonishing. And what's amazing is you see actors doing their work in a way for a gold.
Yeah.
And I just think that's beautiful. I mean, all of you guys. And then, I mean, Asteria, it's easy to, I always, in a way, it's easiest to forget Asteria in this regard because I just take her for granted. But she's the entire world. She inhabits the realm of Lacuna. She inhabits all of the queens. She inhabits every single character inside of it and builds an interior life for that character. Like they open their imagination, the entire thing happens in their imagination and we enter into it and build from it. And it's like, and the way that Asteria navigates in and out of character and storytelling in third person about a character and third person from the point of view of like the gods, from like human being in the room at the table trying to figure out how to tell a story. It's like, it's just unbelievable virtuosity. And it's so beautiful.
There's a moment in the finale, so you haven't gotten there yet, but Asteria is essentially having a conversation with herself. And it's like 3 or 4 different characters that of course all sound different. And they're essentially arguing with each other. So she's having an argument with himself. And you're just like, wow. Like, how did you do that? Teach me. It's really interesting. You're talking about yourself in a third person, but you're kind of inhabiting a first person space. When I write in third person limited, which is essentially first person in a third person trench coat. It's not omniscient. You don't see the inner thoughts of everybody in the scene. You're writing from a person's point of view and you see what's going on internally, but it's done through a third person narrative. So it's really just, again, first person in a third person, but whenever I do this stuff, I always just go first person. So it's just like, because I understand third person. I use it all the time when I write, but I just don't use it when I do this. And I'm just like, I don't understand exactly why that is. And I know there's definitely been moments where like I probably should separate the two because I have not done the best job in separating myself in some moments. No, but
I don't think there's a right. I don't think there's a right balance to find. I think it's a question of, I can understand if when we're doing a certain kind of show that there would be a code and like for the sake of the smoothness of the storytelling, you want a consistent code. But to me, what's so fascinating about this experiment where we're coming at it from getting back to the original question, right? From your gaming and my theater and J. Ben Asteria and Katie's combination of both, right? I think what's so interesting about that experiment is finding how we all use these tools collectively and individually.
Right.
I'm learning so much about acting, period. From all of you and from the combination of all of us and even from this guy. I had never had to describe to myself what I'm doing in those spaces between when I'm going in between third person and first person. And there would be no room to end. Like that's, I was thinking about the fact that in my voice classes, when I was in graduate school, one of the things that our professor, she was this legend in the vocal training world, Kristen Linklater was her name. And you would be up there working working in front of the class and doing your humming and whatever, and your language, your haikus, your poems, whatever. And then you would also be talking about, and what am I feeling? What do I need? Or talking in the character, what is going on for the character she's feeling. And anyway, she would always ask us to say I. that, you know, like just let it be let it be me. And I use that with my students too, because for sure, it's like you're coming from a place of me. You're putting yourself through the lens of it. You're the only person whose feelings and thoughts you know, right?
Right.
And so like in some way, however far away from you Ginny is, right? She's still like, you are the stuff of which she's made.
I love that. I didn't think about it that way. And also, I know you were like, I'm just going to nerd out. I love that you did that. Thank you so much for all of that. And we were talking about spectrums of the made up spectrum of gamer to actor, and then this is other spectrum of Stanislavski to Brecht, and like where we all fall into that spectrum. No, I love that. That was fantastic. Thank you so much for doing all of that nerd work. I could. David, I could talk to you about this all day.
Thank you for giving me space to do it. Oh, this is really fun. This is really fun.
I literally could do this with you all day. But I just want to leave kind of with this for the both of us. I've learned a lot more about acting. You've learned a lot more about gaming, but I think we both also have learned the opposite as well. Because you were just saying you learned a lot more about acting doing this. I've learned a lot more about gaming doing this.
Yes, such a good point.
Yeah, and I don't know if I could think of a better group of people to do this experiment with.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna gush at you for a few minutes here. So when we started doing our sessions here, when we all met, Asteria wanted to do this kind of collaborative storytelling where we, one person starts off the story and then the next person picks it up and then picks it up and picks it up. And when it was your turn, the way that you were just using all of these descriptions and language, and it was just so fascinating. And considering I met you literally like 15 minutes beforehand, and I'm just like, oh my God, who are these people? But you were amazing. And I hear it every time I edit and you're talking, you do have a really flowing nature of the way that you describe the world that we made up together, that I just love listening to. And I could literally listen to it all day long, and I could talk to you all day long, but I don't want to hold you any longer than I have to. Did you have any closing thoughts for this?
I could continue going on and on and on as well. I mean, this is exactly what I was hoping for in coming into this project, into this process, like, everything that we're talking about now. And I feel profoundly grateful. The world is so dark right now, and it's January 2026 for somewhere in the first 2.5 weeks of the year, which have themselves been a century, and Lacuna has a great deal of real estate in my mind right now. I mean, it's a world. And it's a world that overlaps and intersects with and grows from, and also like is an escape from this world, but it's all of them at the same time. You can't need to do one thing, you can't need something to be one thing for you. And there's so many things, and that's, you're all the people who inhabit it with me. And it's just, I'm really, really grateful for it. It's a place to both go deeper inside of everything that we're living now, and a place to like explore the parts of existence that transcend present circumstances. So yeah. I'm really happy to know you and to both get to experience your work as we're building it together, which I appreciate so much, and then to experience it again listening, both to your work as an editor and your work as a performer, and everyone's work inside of it. Lacuna's an inspiring place to be.
Yeah, I agree. David, This has been amazing. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today and talking to me about this subject. I wish we could do it more.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. And then Asteria, we're going to end it here.
Thank you for listening to Duality Bites, a production of Hag Deal Gaming. If you like what we're doing here, come say hi on Blue Sky or TikTok at Hag Deal Gaming. Leave us a review. We'd love to know what you think. And remember, as a wise person once said,
I may have been seduced by gaming, but I was kidnapped by theater.